Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, October 18th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Heath Brown, author of Homeschooling the Right, how conservative education activism erodes the state. Also on the program today, Colin Powell, first black U.S. Secretary of State, who lent that credibility to close the pitch for the illegal invasion and occupation of Iraq. Died yesterday. Meanwhile, Joe Manchin makes it clear how much he wants to punish the American people. Refuses the clean power initiatives, wants to decimate the child tax credit, and more in the Build Back Better plan. In Haiti, 12 American Christian aid workers have been kidnapped because, of course, of political disarray there. IATSE strikes a deal with motion picture and television producers, however, awaiting rank and file approval. FDA panel recommends a J&J booster shot for those eligible. Meanwhile, the FDA also examines mixing and matching shots. Dozens killed and wounded after bombings in the Kandahar region of Afghanistan. Kandahar region, incidentally, the base of support for the Taliban. Those bombings from ISIS, Khorasan, I think it is, in Afghanistan. Texas maps deny Hispanic representation despite Hispanics being responsible for over 90% of the millions of growth numbers of people who have come into Texas in the past 10 years. Meanwhile, Illinois Democrats consider clawbacking some of those congressional seats. And lastly, immigration advocates walk out on Biden administration representatives in disgust. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, is the beginning. I don't know where I was going with that. It is the beginning of the week, what we call around here Monday. And Emma Vigland, welcome to another week.
Thank you. It's also fall, so I broke out the little turtleneck.
You brought out the turtleneck? It's sort of like a mock turtleneck.
Yeah, it's a light fabric, too. You'll know when it gets chunkier and chunkier and I take up more of the screen, that's when it'll be January or February. Also, I'll be depressed from seasonal effect.
Wow, all right, great. Well, we got all those things to look forward to.
Big sweater and depression.
Exactly.
That's how it works.
Fall colors. Yeah, well, I got that light box over there from back in the day, so
maybe we need to use that. Yeah, for now it's lovely out.
Gorgeous. This is August. August. Autumn is the best time of the year in these parts, as far as I'm concerned, except for the impending sense of doom. Mm-hmm. Folks, let's get to it today. Colin Powell has passed away. He had cancer, apparently, and also COVID-19, and that is a tough mix, even if you are vaccinated.
His blood cancer specifically, I think, weakened his immune system to such a degree that it made things difficult.
And he's 84.
Right.
I mean, the biggest comorbidity for COVID is being over the age of, 75. And then the second one is being over the age of 65. There are breakthrough infections with the vaccine. And if you have other comorbidities like cancer, and that at that age, it is, that's why we need to try and eradicate COVID as much as possible, because there are people who are always going to be vulnerable in our society. But there's going to be a tremendous amount of hagiography of Colin Powell. I remember starting, I think it was in 2009, there was a concerted effort to like a reformation process for Colin Powell. And Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, who I think I've interviewed maybe once or twice over the course of that decade. I'm not sure in what context. It's possible I did not. Probably not. There were years you could see him everywhere on the left, whether it was on Democracy Now! Or showing up on some of the left-leaning shows on MSNBC or in other places, both as a pretty strong advocate of, against military action at the times, but also really, really part of Colin Powell's Reformation Project.
It's a CYA.
And a total CYA. And I remember distinctly Wilkerson talking about how that day that Colin Powell had to give that speech in front of the UN was one of the hardest days for him personally and for Colin Powell. And they had told George Tenet, we're not going to say this, or we're not going to say that. Let's look at a little bit of what he did say and understand. Colin Powell was such an important piece of the Bush administration when it came to talking to like moderates and liberals. If you want to talk about who the two biggest figures were that sold the Iraq war to people who would at least have had some natural tendency to be hesitant to go after a country which had absolutely no connection to 9/11. Thomas Friedman and Colin Powell would be your two top candidates, it seems to me, and not necessarily in that order. Here is Colin Powell giving a speech at the UN, basically leading up. He was right. He's like in the pitching world, they'd call him the closer.
Right.
Things that emerges from the thick intelligence file we have on Iraq's biological weapons is the existence of mobile production facilities used to make biological agents. Let me take you inside that intelligence file and share with you what we know from eyewitness accounts. We have first-hand descriptions of biological weapons factories on wheels and on rails. The trucks and train cars are easily moved and are designed to evade detection by inspectors. In a matter of months, they can produce a quantity of biological poison equal to the entire amount that Iraq claimed to have produced in the years prior to the Gulf War. Saddam Hussein's intentions have never changed. He is not developing the missiles for self-defense. These are missiles that Iraq wants in order to project power, to threaten, and to deliver chemical, biological, and, if we let him, nuclear warheads.
And of course, none of that was true.
I remember the weapons labs on rails, like little
the mobile weapons labs. Yes. Now, understand, there were weapons inspectors on the ground in the lead up to the invasion, bombing of Iraq, and they were in public calling on the CIA, calling on the Bush administration, just give us some more locations because we're not finding anything. Anything. And put up that piece that was written today, even. Was it Richard Haas? It was about Richard Haas. Colin Powell, this is at Market Watch. Colin Powell scrubbed from UN testimony in 2003. That's the clip that we just watched. All but 2 to 5% of flawed intelligence on Iraq weapons, longtime ally estimates.
Wow, what a hero.
What a hero. Only 95% of the laws. The draft prepared by Vice President Dick Cheney's office was just loaded with all sorts of misinformation, all sorts of questionable intelligence, recalls Richard Haas. Keep scrolling up.
Which Colin Powell later said he understood in as a part of his reclamation project later to say, oh, he was unsure about the intelligence. Well, you didn't present a case that had any doubt in front of the United Nations.
And let's be clear. If somebody hands you a document and says, hey, go in front of the world, literally, and deliver this, and you go like, there's a ton of misinformation in this.
Yes, the file may be thick, but it's full of things I don't necessarily believe.
I'm aware I'm going to have to eliminate a ton of, like, almost all of the misinformation.
It's junk intelligence.
Except the crucial 2 to 5% of misinformation that we really need to still get the job done here.
Yeah.
Well, let's also be clear. You hand me a document that has that much misinformation, I'm going to look at you and go like, maybe this person doesn't have necessarily the best intentions or their integrity is questionable. There is no doubt that if Colin Powell, the day after giving that speech, and I know he's a good soldier, he's going to do what the commander-in-chief orders him, even though at that time he is Secretary of State. He is not a soldier.
Well, I mean, he learned well from the My Lai massacre.
But regardless, if you want to have integrity in that moment, if that guy resigns the day after, there is no Iraq war.
Or even if, I guess, he doesn't revise the 95% of lies out of it, and it's just an incredible delivery of facts.
Or just refuses to go in front of
the UN.
I mean,
that's why he went there, because they needed that extra push over the finish line in order to convince the international community that this wasn't a completely illegal war, which it was.
It was also, and they didn't.
Yeah.
They didn't convince the international community. There had to be a special coalition of the willing. But that was to sell to the American public. Yeah. Because the line at the time was, Colin Powell is a man of integrity. He would not go in front of the UN unless they had what they said they had. That was exactly how it was sold at that time. And so if there has ever been an instance in history where one person could have done one thing to save hundreds upon hundreds of innocent lives, Colin Powell was presented with that kind of moment. And so all the other things you want to say about him, nice guy,
statesman, but just to add to that, just really quickly, the statesmanliness of him is actually what makes it more evil, because he used that credibility that he had built up from that time in order to sell this illegal war. So like when we're seeing all of these hagiographies and these obituaries about how nice of a guy he is or how much of a professional he was, he used what he built up there in order to do this evil thing. So we can't divorce what the outcome was from his conduct or the way he conducted himself.
Well, exactly, because he leveraged that as a way.
It makes it worse
of basically getting people to sign off on the idea of killing hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. Never mind the displacement of millions internal and external refugees.
He was a war criminal, and that's what it needs, how it needs to be framed.
So may have been a nice father, husband, son, and interesting story of a guy overcoming racial barriers to then go on and use all of that he had built as a leverage point to provide for the deaths, killings, murders of hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. So, 84, that's a pretty good run. There's literally hundreds of thousands of people who never even came remotely close to that age because he had to follow the orders, I guess.
And the fact that he was still so respected after all of this is a condemnation of the entire system, and less of like a boon to who he was personally.
Yep. Well, at that point, then you have people who are invested in the idea of like, well, if he can maintain some integrity, then I can maintain some integrity. Right. So, all right, going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Heath Brown, Associate Professor of Public Policy at John Jay College, author of Homeschooling the Right, How Conservative Education Activism Erodes the State, particularly apropos at the moment. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, folks. We're not going to do, we're going to keep this part for members, please. Oh, you know what? Maybe we should just do this only for members, because let's get members to know this first. All right. So you can cut the members thing right after this and cut out the ads. Members, I'm talking only to you. Oh, wait, we're also live.
Yeah, we're live and like,
oh, shoot.
What are you doing?
I thought this was going to be sneaky for them. All right, well, whatever. I blew that. Hey, we're doing a live show. It's in Boston. And It's going to be on Sunday, January 16th at 3 p.m. Tickets will go on sale tomorrow. And maybe we'll give the pre-sale code to members only. But then you'll have a chance to get tickets on Wednesday.
Working that out on the fly.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a live show. Here are the details. It's a live show. It's at 3 p.m. in Boston at the Wilbur Theater. And that's all we got for you right now. But check it out. Oh, and you're going to have to be vaccinated and probably wear a mask.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was spoiler alert.
I don't know. I might take a stand.
Or Kyrie. Hey, today's episode is sponsored by Honey. Everybody shops online these days, really, any days. And you've all seen that promo code. It taunts you at the checkout. Oh, darn it. Should I go look for a promo code? Are you one of those people who look for a promo code? Because I was constantly. Of course I was.
Yes.
In fact, it was like I had, multiple conversations with my kids, about sex and about drugs and about coupon codes. You always got to search for the coupon codes.
That's called the talk.
The talk.
It's about how you got to save money on your online purchases.
But then found Honey. It is a free browser extension. It scours the internet for promo codes and applies the best one as you check out at your cart. You don't have to do anything. Once you set it up once, and it's super easy to set it up, it does all the work. It supports over 30,000 stores online, sites that have tech and gaming products, fashion brands, even food delivery. So this is how it works. You're shopping on one of your favorite sites. When you check out, the Honey button drops down, and all you have to do is click Apply Coupons. You wait a few seconds, literally a few seconds, and as Honey searches for coupons, it can find for that site. If Honey finds a working coupon, boom, you save $5, you save $10, sometimes you save 15, 20 bucks. Honey has found over 17 million members, over $2 billion in savings. I'm wearing a coat. Well, I'm not currently wearing a coat, but I'm wearing a coat over there. I got a couple of bucks off. And the best part for me is that, when they don't find a coupon, they let you know, and then you're just like, okay, I don't have to feel like I dropped the ball.
Right.
That, to me, is actually the best part. I know that's sick, twisted logic, but that, for me, is the best part. I would be taunted by not saving $5 more than I am actually happy by saving $5. I'm happy to save $5, but just the idea that I could have and I left it on the table drives me crazy. If you don't already have Honey, you could be straight up missing out on free savings. And it is literally free. It installs in a few seconds. And by getting it, you'll be doing yourself solid. You'll be supporting this podcast. You get honey for free at joinhoney.com/majority. That's joinhoney.com/majority. Also, show sponsored today by ZipRecruiter. Look, sometimes in life we like to pick things out for ourselves so we know we got the one that's best for us. Maybe that's a specific thing on the menu. Maybe it's a mattress, whatever. But what if you could do the same thing for hiring? Choose your ideal candidate before they even apply. That's where ZipRecruiter's invite to apply comes in. It gives you, the hiring manager, the power to pick your favorites from top candidates. And right now, you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/majority. When you post a job on ZipRecruiter, they send you your job, and they send to the most qualified candidates for your job, and they also send the most qualified candidates to the job to you. So then you can easily review the candidates and invite your top choices to actually apply for the job. Lauren Webb, SVP of Talent Acquisition for Mindula Health, raves about invite to apply, saying, I love that feature because we have much higher follow-through rate if I invite candidates. And the other thing is, too, is like, maybe you're not ready to hire unless you find the right person. This is a great way to go about that. According to ZipRecruiter Internal Data, jobs where employers use ZipRecruiter's invite to reply get on average 2.5 times more candidates, and this helps, of course, for a faster hiring process. See for yourself. Just go to this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/majority. Try ZipRecruiter for free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/majority, MAJORITY. ZipRecruiter, it is the smartest way to hire. We know that for sure around these parts on this program, having used it ourselves. And lastly, there was a unfortunate tweet the other day. Glenn Greenwald had somehow mistakenly thought that he found a clip from May that actually, I went and checked out this guy's site who actually posted the clip. Very dubious. Nevertheless, the point is, the clip was from May, and it was that time where Carl Behar came on and wanted to ask me if I was a socialist. And I was asking him, I was sort of playing devil's advocate. I don't think I am a socialist but apparently Glenn didn't understand the clip. It was in some type of frenzy. The point being, he sort of claimed, like, I love how Sam can do ads and claim to be a socialist. And someone wrote back, yeah, Sam is really in the pocket of Big Tushy. And in fact, this is an ad for Tushy. Mm. You can get a Tushy. It's the modern bidet that attaches directly to your toilet in under 10 minutes. Well, let me put it this way. The integrity of my underside has been improved greatly with my use of Tushy. It is, I picked it up during COVID and have never looked back. No pun intended. Tushy is the modern bidet for people who go number 2. What you do, you poop, you wash, you pat dry. Tushy bidet washes your bum with water for a better clean than toilet paper. That should be obvious, folks. You don't use dry paper on your hands when you're washing them. Washing with water, of course, is also less irritating and more soothing for you. Tushy bidet is easy to install, super easy. And it attaches to the toilet in under 10 minutes. You don't need electricity. You don't need any new plumbing or anything like that. Using a Tushy bidet reduces your toilet paper use by 80%. It saves you money. It's eco-friendly and it is stylish. And I'll tell you something. If you ever priced out a full-on bidet as opposed to a bidet attachment, do yourself a favor. Check this out because you'll be shocked. Start washing with a Tushy bidet for a better clean. Go to hellotushy.com/majority. Get 10% off plus free shipping. This special offer for our listeners at hellotushy.com/majority. 10% off. After you buy and install your Tushy, show it off. Tag at HelloTushy on Instagram. All right. And as always, we'll put all the links in our podcast description and our YouTube description. And you can support this show by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. I want to welcome to the program Heath Brown, Associate Professor of Public Policy at John Jay College, author of Homeschooling the Right, How Conservative Education Activism Erodes the State. Heath, I'm here with Emma Vigeland. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you guys. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for the interest in the topic.
Well, I got to say, talk about some like good timing, both on the sort of the experience that a lot of people have had over the past year and a half from, and we'll talk about this, not quite homeschooling in the way you're writing about it, but schooling from home anyways. And also a burgeoning movement on the right, or a reanimated movement on the right, where attacking school boards and schooling has become some form of like leverage point for what I believe is the midterm elections. But we will talk about that. But let's just start with sort of some of the basics. When did homeschooling as a thing, as opposed to going to school, become a thing?
Yeah, you grasp at these words for a good reason, which is homeschooling kind of in one way has existed forever. This is not new, but what we're really talking about, kind of capital H homeschooling, we're really talking about the early 1980s. That's when states began to either legalize or adopt policies that made homeschooling possible. Prior to that, people homeschooled in small numbers, but it was at the margins, sometimes illegal in a way, often not accepted. But by the end of the 1980s, nearly every state in the country had made homeschooling legal, accepted, and something that families could choose to do. And ever since, the numbers have grown enormously. But we sort of place this in the early 1980s, 1981, 1982, the first state starting to do this. So,
and my understanding from you is at that time, the demographic, psychographic, the political makeup of homeschoolers was pretty varied. That ranged from like hippies, if you will, or sort of like, libertarian left type of people a little bit, into conservatives. But I wonder if the reason why we saw government respond to homeschooling at that point was in reaction to all of that specter of people, or whether it was a reaction to the conservative cohort of homeschoolers. Because one, we're talking about the Reagan administration. Two, we're talking about the blowback from busing, I would imagine, in some instances, and maybe the secularization of our society that was taking place then. I mean, give me a sense of like why it was in 1980s we start to see the government sort of like, institutionalize homeschooling.
Yeah, I think that initial coalition to back the adoption of homeschool policy was varied, ideologically varied, geographically varied. We're talking about a movement that pulled together the hippies and the sort of anti-institutionalists, Christian conservatives, libertarians, all agreeing that this is something that should be done. I think one of the reasons for the timing of this is there's very little opposition to homeschooling, in part because there's almost no money on the table. So unlike other educational reforms that have had pro and anti sides, where money matters, money's being taken away from one school and moved to another, moved from one set of teachers and moved to another. Busing, I think, is a good example where the issue played out with sort of winners and losers. Homeschooling really worked out differently. So it wasn't very difficult for states, and that's states very much, to adopt these laws. But that initial coalition that was varied ideologically and politically became quite quickly dominated by the conservative wing of the homeschooling movement. So when we talk about the homeschooling movement, we're really talking about primarily a conservative movement, which is not to say that all homeschoolers are ideologically conservative, definitely not the case, but the most politically active from the mid-1980s onward were conservatives. And importantly, the organizations that saw this policy as an opportunity were almost exclusively conservative and were successfully conservative. They were plugged in to other national conservative organizations through some really important people who believe that homeschooling, though small in numbers, can be quite powerful in political terms.
And we should say, the Heritage Foundation, it was in 1974 during the, is it Kanawha County?
Yep.
Just tell us about that situation, because that happens at a time that is concurrent with everything that sort of developed around the Powell memo that had been written a couple of years earlier, where you start to see these right-wing think tanks starting to grow. And I would imagine at that time there is like it's sort of a seller's market, if you will, for people whose issues they want adopted and then sort of made into a power source, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. I sometimes think about this as the homeschooling movement is sort of like one of these indie movies where years later you realize there are all these important people, and how come all of them have a credit in this movie that no one saw? And it sort of operates in that same kind of way. When you look at this history and place yourself back to the early 1970s, and you go to a place like Kanawha County, West Virginia, you see all of these groups and people show up around a protest that started very locally around textbooks. And this is a familiar story to those that know about sort of the history of schooling. But the community adopted a new curriculum that included leading civil rights, readings from leading civil rights leaders like Malcolm X. Some of the community thought that wasn't a good idea, and they protested. And they said these were profane, dirty books. They didn't belong in the curriculum. But what started as a dispute over the curriculum quickly mushroomed, and it became violent, fistfights, dynamite at the school board. I mean, you talk about things that sound so familiar today. This is happening in 1974, but importantly, national level groups see an opportunity. And so the John Birch Society shows up in West Virginia. The Klan shows up in West Virginia. Maybe most importantly, the Heritage Foundation shows up in West Virginia. Just founded in that very year, just founded, the Heritage Foundation, now one of the most important conservative organizations in the country, at its birth, shows up in West Virginia and sees this opportunity. So they dispatch a couple of pretty young sort of policy people. Connie Marshner is one of them, goes on to a distinguished career in conservative circles. And they try to encourage and support these local protesters. And it becomes violent and is sort of a microcosm of what's going on in conservative politics at the time, and pointed to ever since kind of as the mecca, according to Rick Perlstein, as the mecca of the conservative movement. Homeschooling doesn't grow immediately from that, but all of the seeds are planted at that point, including, I think, sort of one of the most telling outcomes, which is one of the leaders, a woman named Alice Moore, who kind of got everything started. Even as things are being resolved, even as the school kids are going back into the schools, they were pulled out. Thousands of kids were pulled out of school in protest to these textbooks. And at the end of this, after it's all resolved, she's sort of unsatisfied with what happens. And she's told the New York Times, parents may now be forced to educate their children in their homes. She is preceding this homeschool movement by about a decade, but is sort of seeing the future for this opt-out politics that's become so powerful for conservatives ever since, including today, when we see all sorts of unrelated policies built around this idea of opting out, dropping out, not participating in sort of the dominant policies of the day. All of that we can see in West Virginia in 1974 at kind of the birth of the homeschooling movement, and in many ways, the birth of the conservative homeschooling movement as well.
And we should say that a lot of these same dynamics are present in the critical race theory fight today, with New York Times reporting that the Koch brothers and other right-wing groups are funding these campaigns to get people energized on the local level about your children being indoctrinated. Like, it's amazing, not to skip ahead to the present, I'll let you go, but just to see how those seeds were sown back in those days, and it's the same conversation that we're having now, basically.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And this idea of indoctrination is so powerful, and it's powerful to some of the leading figures at that time and also today. Somebody like R.J. Rushdoony, who is not sort of a household name today, but at the time, and to kind of those in the know, was seen as one of the most important intellectual figures in the conservative movement. sort of the politicals looked to him for intellectual inspiration, and some of his main messages were about the indoctrination of kids in public schools. And his concerns were primarily fundamentalist Christian concerns, but he saw homeschooling as a way out. He saw it as a way to fight back against a war that he saw conservatives as losing by taking control of the curriculum, moving it into the household, and creating these alternate sort of social paths that these families could control. And it is mainly focused on the kinds of indoctrination concerns that you see today.
How much, and then I want to go into, because, well, I'm struck by this because there's almost like two different levels in which this becomes politicized. There is the political implications of like the sort of the material that involve the material implications in that moment. And then there's this sort of the knock-on, almost parallel creation of a political force that is that applies its politicization outside of the schools. But before we get to that, because that's the difference between like the implications of the charter, where it is with charters in terms of schools, but then also like, the homeschoolers for Bush type of thing in 2000. But before we get there, I don't want to belabor this too much, but I mean, I get that a lot of this has to do with the Christian fundamentalism. And certainly everybody I've known, although, late Michael Brooks, our friend here, was homeschooled, was not a Christian fundamentalist by any stretch of the imagination. But everyone else I know who's a homeschooler was doing so out of like some type of fundamentalist perspective. But this is like, you scratch below the surface there, a lot of this is race, right? I mean, that's why 50 years later, we're still talking about critical race theory when then it was just like, you're celebrating Martin Luther King Day or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, when social scientists ask people about why they homeschool, race isn't what they say, but that isn't what people say when they're asked a survey question. What they typically say are things like their concerns about morality in schools and not being able to teach about religion. They're concerned about the environment in school. But for a lot of people, those are the kind of coded language that people use when they have concerns about race and who their kids are going to be learning next to. We see this in lots of other kinds of education reform. It is the context, it's the subtext of all discussions of education in the United States, and homeschooling doesn't escape that. Which doesn't mean that I think all parents who do this are aware of their what they're doing, but I think that you cannot ignore the importance of race and racism and the politics of this in its development, especially for those that are operating in the national sort of political and lobbying world, who are aware of the power of these messages and power of concerns that parents have. But this goes back before 1974 to the very, just after the Brown versus the Board of Education decision, the response of opponents shared a lot in common with these concerns about parental rights and who should be in charge of education. And that theme of parental rights goes back to the mid-1950s and today is just as resonant.
So let's compare it to the charter movement, because they both have to do with education, but it seems to me that like the charter movement is the factors behind the charter movement are much more varied and have much more like direct implications for public education than homeschooling does for public education. But homeschooling has greater implications for our society at large in terms of the ideological fight. So I mean, we talk about how charter and how these things break down differently.
Yeah. So from a distance, they sound so similar. These are both school choice. And when you see, candidates for the presidency talk about education, they'll often run down a list, especially Republicans, and they'll say, I'm for vouchers, I'm for charter schools, I'm for homeschooling. You name the choice, I'm for it. You'd be led to believe that these are similar and they have very similar histories. I couldn't be farther from the truth. As I alluded to earlier, homeschooling emerges in the 1980s, charter schooling in the 1990s. So homeschooling precedes the charter school adoption, which starts in 1991 and sort of is adopted state by state over the 1990s and early 2000s. But the design of these are so different. Charter schooling has direct financial consequences for other public schools, and charter schools are public. They're also bound in a lot of ways that homeschooling isn't. The rules imposed on home schools, and importantly on who teaches it at home, are minimal almost everywhere in the country. And the most stringent homeschool policy in the country is probably less stringent than the least stringent charter school policy. So in some states, you don't have to have a high school diploma to be a homeschool teacher. There's almost nowhere where you have to be a certified teacher to teach in the home. The rules on accountability and testing and so forth are very different. But those are the details of the policy. In political terms, one of the consequences of that is in charter schooling, there's huge opposition. And so we have the forces supporting charter schooling, those opposing it, and the charter school laws sort of go back and forth in sort of an incremental process over time. Homeschooling is very different. There are commentators that would say homeschooling has never gone backwards. They've never lost a political battle. No state becomes less accepting to homeschooling. They become more and more permissive to more and more forms of homeschooling. That's in part because there's very little opposition and the homeschool community is so well organized. Another difference is Democrats and Republicans have both taken up charter schooling since its founding. Homeschooling, not so much. Democrats have never talked publicly about homeschooling until very recently. And so they're very different movements. And as a result, homeschooling has taken a prominent place in the Republican Party, and charter schooling has sat in both parties as an education primarily, education policy primarily, but not much more. Homeschooling has meant much more, especially to Republican candidates.
Well, I think that last part is true, but I should say that the charter schools, it seems to me, have also become a mechanism in which to attack the teachers' unions. It has become, it has also become, depending on what state you're talking about, big business. And there's a lot of money to be made in charter schools. In a way that there isn't. I imagine there's some of that in the homeschool network, but that seems sort of like downstream from people doing it as much as it is like the charters. People get in it on day one and they're like, we're going to make some money here. We're going to we have these private companies that do this education thing. And I think there's also, some measure of the ideology of like, it's a good thing to privatize as much of education as you can. This homeschooling doesn't feel like it has, like that ideology comes second. Like the reason why people homeschool is not to privatize education in society, but just to privatize it for themselves. Then the ideology builds out from there. Like the sequencing seems different to me.
I think you're right, though I'm not throwing a homeschooling convention, but I'd invite you to attend a homeschooling convention at which there will be dozens and dozens of publishers selling educational curriculum, because those sales go directly to parents, whereas charter school curriculum are adopted in some quasi-democratic way, not by an individual teacher, individual parent. And so there's a pretty big market for homeschool curriculum, especially some versions of curriculum that don't talk about evolution, that are purposefully conservative, often purposely religious. And so we see things going on in that market. But I think you're right that the dynamics are very different. They're almost hard to compare in many ways. And the teachers union part of this, I think, is incredibly important, that charter schools for some were a way to fight against teachers unions. But as a result, at the state level, we see kind of in some ways, a fair fight between advocates for and against charter schools, and teachers' unions, which are organized, in many states well-resourced, have been able to fight back. And so you see in some places, New York City is a good example, that unions have been able to fight against expansion of the cap on the number of charter schools. And so we see this kind of equilibrium, a push and pull, that really doesn't exist in homeschooling because there aren't organized opponents like there are in the charter school community. And so they play in kind of such different ways that they're almost hard to even compare in a way. And privatization, which has always felt so distant from the homeschooling world, today is actually the most important thing. Is because one of the things we know during the pandemic is there's been this push for more and more educational savings accounts, vouchers, parents given the money to spend it as they would please. And if you are operating a homeschool curriculum or you're operating, this is a massive opportunity, right? Because you plug into not some vague bureaucracy charter school company that's going to buy a curriculum, but individual parents who are going to be buying from semester to semester, year to year, what their kids are going to be learning it from. And so that's changed. The voucher homeschooling communities used to sit far from each other. Now they're growing closer and closer together for a lot of kind of interesting ways, interesting reasons. But because of that, money is all of a sudden on the table. And the politics of this moving forward are going to be very different than the politics that has preceded us.
Is part of this because opposition to, say, a parent's decision to withdraw their kids from public school and have them be homeschooled might seem a lot more difficult to combat? And, you know, it doesn't seem like a fight that people are going to take up because it's so atomized and individualized, that unlike charter schools where you can see there's a large privatization effort and there's a profit motive, there's more of a way to combat that from a public policy sense, as opposed to say, oh, this family's gonna, like, it doesn't seem collective, even though it is a part of a larger right-wing project, which you've pointed out so well. So it's easier to get away with and slip under the shadows, I guess.
No, you're exactly right. And I think I, in the book, use some less useful language than you just used to describe this, which is how invisible homeschooling has always appeared. Even as the numbers have grown over time, I think until maybe like 2 years ago, most people would say, like, what are you talking about? And when I first pitched this book to my publisher, they kind of said, well, what are you talking about? This is like such a minor thing. This isn't a book. Well, you know, it turned into a book, and all of a sudden it became something that made much more sense. But I think for a lot of people, the homeschooling exists at the margins, and it's not something they have to be aware of. And so the politics and communities, unlike charter schools, which were a new building in the town or the city that kids weren't educated at, and now they were. And so that invisibility, I think, is part of the dynamics of homeschooling.
And just to build on that comment, it was also, it seems to me, that homeschooling was just simply less of a threat to the project of, if you want to say, Democrats or communitarians. I mean, it's just like these are
or they felt that way.
Or they felt that way. I mean, I think like COVID may have changed that dynamic, and that's like where we should go, I think, in terms of like discussing that. But it seems to me that prior to COVID, the idea of homeschooling was not substantial enough to undermine the institution of public education in the way that, let's say, charters could, or the way that vouchers could. Although vouchers, certainly homeschooling plays into vouchers, right? Because I'm going to take my voucher and I'm going to go to the school of, Sam's apartment, and my kids are going to get taught, and I'm going to use that money to buy curriculum and whatnot. And I'll drain some of the public school. But as a movement, it seems to me that is a second order issue was for homeschooling. Like you have these disparate people who are going to decide to leave the school. It's not going to fundamentally undermine public school because you're not pulling cash out. Has that changed Or am I wrong about that? Like it wasn't the reason why it could be indivisible was because largely the implications of it just weren't as dramatic as these other initiatives, if you will, about school.
You know, I think in some ways you are, but in other ways, what this relates to is where these two things were happening. So charter schooling has been primarily an urban city phenomenon. It has succeeded wildly in large cities. Homeschooling, on the other hand, has primarily been a rural and suburban phenomenon. So in a state like North Carolina, where charter schooling hasn't been prominent, homeschooling is where we see in rural counties some of the most significant loss of students. And in a small rural community in Western North Carolina, 50 students leaving, 100 students leaving to homeschool is not a big deal. But there are parts of North Carolina where this is getting up to be 1,000, 3,000, 5,000. And so the numbers game in rural communities makes this a bigger issue than it would appear in cities, in urban areas, where charter schooling is a much, much bigger phenomenon. So in some ways, this is happening in geographically in such different ways that it is felt in different ways. So the New York City, there are homeschoolers in New York City, but the political phenomena is really charter schooling. Whereas if you go to Western North Carolina or Arkansas or parts of the country where homeschooling has thrived and charter schooling hasn't, that's where you see more losses from schools. But it's smaller, it's one student at a time, and that grows over time. But at some point, you get to some point at which a school has to close because so many students have left for homeschooling. That's different. I mean, the other big change here is technology. Technology has made homeschooling possible in a way today that's very different than it was 30 odd years ago. So in some ways, the geography of this matters a lot.
Let's talk about the sort of the knock-on impact of homeschooling, particularly this sort of like cohort of people. They became a legit force for Bush's election in 2000. Fran Eaton organized talk about that dynamic, because I think George Bush really was able to sort of really coalesce fundamentalist religious support for him in a way that I think he perfected it, or at least Karl Rove did. I mean, and I think we saw that in the context of of his anti-marriage equality amendment, and that whole push seemed to be sort of almost like the peak of that.
Yeah, homeschooling has never been just about education. And so for national homeschool leaders, including those at sort of the prominent organization called the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, HSLDA, they always recognized this wasn't just about families setting up schools in their living rooms. There was something about something more. And the head of the HSLDA, a man named Michael Farris, always talked about this. And he talked about really this being a way to train culture warriors. And he was quite vocal and quite public about this. This wasn't a secret to Michael Farris and others in his organization. There's a guy named Christopher Klicka who did something similar, would talk about this as almost a religious movement. And so what we see is this happening. And so by 2000, there are organizations formed across the country that are aware of homeschooling, have homeschooling parents organized, mainly to do the work of homeschooling, which is so difficult. It takes so much work to try to figure out how to educate kids at home. But that organizing didn't stop at putting together a curriculum. It became political. And Fran Eaton, who was a devotee of Phyllis Schlafly, sort of came up in the conservative movement, learned how to organize people, and recognized that homeschool parents were looking for curricular material. Like, how do you fill up the day? I mean, every parent now has probably over the last 2 years faced that question. How do you just fill up the day with material? And Fran Eaton realized that in the fall, as elections are going on, homeschooling parents could turn the campaign into a educational activity. And so he created this game, sort of Homeschoolers for Bush. that took the idea of sort of the civic purpose of education, sort of flipped it on its head. And they went about organizing so that kids would get points for volunteering on a campaign or helping getting people registered. It was almost exclusively for Republican candidates and for George Bush. And so this became formalized, became something that was very well organized at the national level. And George Bush, once he won, eventually, sort of thanked these organizers and said that, you are part of why I got elected. And ever since, Republican candidates have gone back to these same organizations and said, I want to be your candidate. I want you to help me organize because you have the time and the motivation to go out and knock on doors, get people to turn out. And so we see lots of people doing this ever since. Mike Huckabee did this to win Iowa in 2008. Michelle Bachmann, kind of the famous of the Tea Party movement of 2010 and 2012, relies heavily in 2012 on homeschoolers as the basis for her campaign. And most recently, Ted Cruz, who had set up his whole campaign in 2016 around homeschool leaders, including some major funders, but homeschool families who are going to go out and help turn out the campaign for him. It didn't work, but that really was his strategy. And so it has drifted from an education movement to become really a political movement, a conservative political movement as well.
So let's talk about like what's happening now. I mean, and we should make a distinction, right? Like, I guess I homeschooled my kids for I can't remember, how many months it was, the longest months of my life, but that wasn't really homeschooling, right? But it has had an impact in terms of how, or I should ask you, do we have a sense at this point of like how the experience last year, and I think largely, people are at least going back to school at the very least in a hybrid situation. In New York, we're all in, but what do you think the impact of that will be on the phenomena of homeschooling, but on more specifically the phenomena of the political implications of homeschooling?
Yeah, in some ways it cuts two ways. And you're right, at the beginning of your question, you're right. A majority in survey results of homeschool parents vote for Republican presidential candidates. About 60% voted for Mitt Romney, John McCain, and also Donald Trump. So that's not all. 40-odd% are supporting other candidates, but it's a majority. But what we, I think, see over time, especially over the last 2 years, is a diversification of who homeschools. Homeschool used to be largely white, largely Christian, largely two-parent households. That has changed over time. Homeschooling has become much more racially and ethnically diverse. And as those changes have happened, it's changed the politics of homeschooling. And so I think we're going to see that. It's going to be much more difficult to identify the politics of someone who homeschools in the future, as it was in the past. But I think that's really just sort of the immediate and most obvious effect. I think there's another effect that cuts the other direction, which is for those families like yours who homeschooled. I think over time there's an erosion of those public values that public schools are so important in socializing. That is a socialization of both the kids, but also the parents. And so I think the longer the pandemic lasts, the more people who engage in homeschooling, the larger portion of people who are angry at public schools, angry at school closures, we get this erosion of the faith in public institutions. And that's kind of a long-term, much more ambiguous kind of effect, but one that I think is worrisome in a lot of ways, because those fundamental beliefs in the local collective school are ones that are fragile and are hard to build back up.
But it feels to me like that can cut the other way too, because I don't know that my appreciation for the socialization, both for me and my kids in terms of public school, has ever been higher than it is after that year and a half. I mean, and that, and I guess it depends on where you are, right? I mean, like if I'm in Brooklyn, maybe that sense is far more pervasive than it is, if I'm out in a rural area where it's like, oh, now this is a pain in the ass. But it seems to me like it cuts both ways.
It does, but people aren't just on their own with their experiences. We're shaped by messaging and organizing, and Emma, you sort of alluded to earlier the Cope Network, and they have funded organizations over the last 2 years with a specific purpose to support homeschooling, and they're not going to be satisfied with people sort of with a vague notion of whether this is good or bad. And well, I really miss my public school teacher. This is part of a project. And I think we're going to see very clear messaging, especially when it cuts with opposition to mask wearing. And we're just at the verge of opposition to vaccination for kids 5 to 11. And so I think that these things just don't operate in a vacuum. And we get these powerful forces that are operating at the same time. A couple of years ago, you had Jamila Michener on your podcast to talk about her work on Medicaid. And this is sort of the flip side of it. She talked about this idea of these feedback effects of how people are mobilized and demobilized by their experiences with public services. These are sometimes unpredictable effects, but I think the points she makes really hold for this as well, which is when people experience public services working or failing, viewing them as legitimate citizens or illegitimate citizens, it shapes who they are. And I think this experience of the pandemic and the experience of educating at home and sort of awareness of what it takes to education, for some will be empowering, and others it will lead them to run back to their public schools with open arms. We just don't really know, but I think it's the possibilities can be pretty worrisome.
Heath Brown, Associate Professor of Public Policy at John Jay College. The book is Homeschooling the Right, How Conservative Education Activism Erodes the State. We will put a link to that at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
All right, folks, quick break. We'll be right back. Wrap things up. All right, folks, if you're watching us on the Peacock app, we are wrapping things up, and we will be back tomorrow. But interesting dynamic with the homeschooling. I mean, even my kids don't, like, I never, ever hear from either one of my kids, I don't want to go to school today.
Yeah, I mean, like...
they're psyched to get out of the house.
Yeah. We can talk about this later, but the idea, like, you have a strong ideology as someone on the left, right? You don't necessarily need to homeschool your kids to indoctrinate them to those ideas, because, like, just being out in the world, that's why the right-wing project's so tantalizing to some of these homeschooling parents. But
all right, folks, if you're on Peacock, we'll see you tomorrow. And if you're not, we're still seeing you. I mean, I don't want to ruin the illusion for anybody, but we don't see you. I mean, we can't physically see you. Now, we're aware of you because there's folks in our YouTube chat.
Yes.
There's folks in our Twitch chat.
Yes.
There's folks on Twitter.
We're aware of you as a number in the view count.
Mm-hmm. We're aware of you as a number.
That's all you are to us.
Discord. We read your messages in the Discord. And you can IM this show by picking up the app at majorityapp.com, and you can actually participate in the program. And if you also feel that you have a well-trained speaking voice,
You can call.
you don't need a well-trained speaking. I don't have one.
You do
I've
need
been
a
able to
good
get away
phone
with it for a long
connection,
time.
though. That's what you need.
I don't want to exclude any of the libertarians. So you can also call in. The number is 646-257-3920, 646-257-3920. As we go into the fun half today, let me give you a tantalizing taste of what we may
You
hear
heard
from.
me say tantalizing a minute ago, and
Did I?
And now,
So now it's
in your brain.
Now it's in my brain.
That's how stunning gets into my vocabulary on a daily basis.
Yep, that happens. That will happen. We could hear from Adam Kinzinger as to why
Do we have to?
The horridness of actually making it allowing people to vote. Chuck Todd actually did something that was we could appreciate. I mean,
We're going to be talking about parental leave a little bit too, which is I'm really excited about.
Oh, that's right.
We got an epic Dave Rubin clip that went pretty viral too.
Yep. We got all sorts of different things like that. And then if you want, we can also tell you about what kind of what the Joe Manchin douchebaggery is up next.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I thought you were giving me that look. I didn't realize you were yawning. I thought you were just shocked that I used that term.
That language?
Don't say that.
Sam, not about Joe Manchin.
It's a senator.
Also, there are folks who smashed the like button on YouTube. And
Smash it.
We see you, and we see you.
No, we don't see you. You may have a parasocial relationship with us, but we don't have that with you.
Well, I see them smashing it. I can see the implications of them smashing the like button. I can see the likes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You're all just numbers to us.
It's like the Matrix.
Also,
I saw you tweet that you've been watching The Matrix over the weekend.
I feel people. Oh God, I feel people when they start getting the hype train rolling on Twitter. Yeah,
and
Twitch.
It's so poggers, dude.
Totally, folks. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes the show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Well, I guess I'll wait a couple of days to make that announcement. But jointhemajorityreport.com, where you can provide support for this program. You allow it to survive and thrive, as it were. So jointhemajorityreport.com. Don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority. You get 10% off. And you can hop on our Discord, majoritydiscord.com. You can get our app at majorityapp.com. Don't forget, Nomi is still in Glasgow, right, Bradley? Yeah, I think so. Okay. Check out Nomi's show.
He's like, this isn't in my job description to know Nomi's whereabouts.
She's still in Glasgow, to the best of our knowledge, and interviewing people in the run-up to the climate summit there. Check it out, youtube.com/The Nomiki Show, youtube.com, The Nomiki Show.
Pretty important, as Manchin is blocking all of the zero carbon provisions in Build Back Better.
What a douche. Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leckian media universe?
The Matt Leckian premium universe got two podcasts this weekend. First, Left Reckoning. Me and David Griscom discussed George Orwell's England, Your England, an essay at the height of the Blitz, and asked the question, can patriotism be useful towards the socialist revolution? So that's for patron members of Left Reckoning. Exactly. And I did a solo episode wrapping up Bird 1712 diary. Tobacco plantation master William Byrd. The second, we go into a few other things, including that.
That's like a literary hangover type of thing. Have you merged like?
Well, the Orwell thing, actually, we had previously discussed that on Literary Hangover, but I want to get Griscom's take on it. The Literary Hangover, we're going to be doing John Milton, Daniel Boone, and some other folks.
So wait, you're still doing Literary Hangover?
Yeah, just a little bit slower.
And what about? Are you still doing? You're not doing any more of the ones where you put the tapes to? I can't remember.
No more information, or no, that's gone.
The information is gone. No, I still talk about it, folks. See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1 half. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way. Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
All right, folks, we are back. The voicemail is now off. You can IM the program. Let's go to this clip. Did we pull that that clip? So, I had mentioned earlier in the program about that Glenn Greenwald thing that he had. I don't think he understood what the clip was because it sort of didn't work out for him. But then that guy. Who's the guy who drinks his own urine in that?
So Joe Rogan, Fear Factor?
No. The other guy, he turned it into lemonade. He said like he had lemonades.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
What's that guy's name?
The Secret Service guy.
The Secret Service guy, exactly.
Bongo or something like that.
Dan Bongo.
Dan Bongos.
Something like that. He.
Is his last name actually Bongos? Oh, it's Bongino.
Bongino. He apparently, like Glenn Greenwald, is his.
Bongino's a very intellectually curious guy. He tries to get opinions from all around the political spectrum.
His assignment editor is Glenn Greenwald, and he didn't even. He knew less of the context. It was like sort of like a telephone game where he's like, this guy doesn't even come across as a socialist.
Just gets farther into the right-wing ecosystem and they can't interpret it at all.
No, it's so funny. But maybe we'll play that tomorrow. It's pretty funny. All right.
Let's know that he's so curious, though, and likes to get all sides of the story.
Yeah. He had a rough time with that NRA thing. I wonder if how he, like, didn't he get, that's how he got launched, right? Like, all that NRA money that turned out to be.
What happened to Dana Loesch?
That's a good question.
Right? She's laying in the weeds somewhere. She was the other NRA TV
I remember
person.
her, definitely.
Yeah.
She used to write. I
didn't even know that Dan
Bongino.
Bongino was on NRA TV. I only knew of Dana Loesch.
I just remember that guy, I think, as being in it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think he was. And then,
he's the guy that gets into fights with Geraldo. Yes. Right.
I don't know. All right. Let's move on to something that's more interesting. Here is Representative Adam Kinzinger on with Jake Tapper. This is the State of the Union on Sunday. And Kinzinger apparently is very, very concerned about the fate of democracy, except for the voting part.
I know you're worried about protecting democracy, and you've been very outspoken. You have opposed both bills from the Democratic Party that are intended to strengthen protection for voters, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, a bill reinstating the Justice Department's power to block some states and localities from enacting what they view as discriminatory voting rules. Why did you not support those bills? And is there a bipartisan effort that you and other Republicans could get behind that could actually protect the rights of voters and get through the House and Senate for President Biden to sign?
No.
I certainly hope there is. I think there is. I think there's been discussions in the Senate from last I've heard. Look, you can call a bill the Voting Rights Act, and then left-wing Twitter goes nuts about this, by the way, and they can say you voted against voting rights without even looking to the details of this. So the quick details, the Voting Rights Act in the mid-'60s came out with a temporary provision called pre-clearance, which required certain states to get clearance for any changes to any election system that they did. That went on into perpetuity. It was intended to be temporary. In 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court threw that provision out and said, history changes. We can't keep pretending like it's 1965. And so for the last 8 years, we have not had that provision in. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act would simply put to re-implement that provision to have, again, the Justice Department make any approval to any changes. By the way, that would have been the Trump Justice Department and anything like that. So yes, we can get to a solution. The problem is, I admonish my side all the time about playing politics. The Democrats have to quit playing politics on some of this too. You can call it the For the People's Act, which was the other one, and really what that is public funding for campaigns, among other whole host of things. If we actually went into this as adults with real discussions, I think we can solve stuff. But instead we just wait for these Twitter comments of, Adam voted against whatever, and then I can put a bill out there, the God and Puppies Act, and see people vote against that and say they're against God and puppies.
We only have a few seconds.
I'm sorry.
Okay, hold on. Wait. This is just a piece of information that Jake Tapper did not get to, because he only had a few seconds left, apparently, was this bill that Kinzinger made sound like was temporary. It very well, it sunsetted or had sunset provisions, but it was reauthorized by 98-2 in the Senate in 2007. That was incidentally a Republican-controlled Senate, if I remember correctly, in 2002. Just look at when the Voting Rights Act was reauthorized by a completely controlled Senate. I think the Democrats had House. I think it was in 2007.
And then when he mentions 8 years ago, what happened 8 years ago that got rid of that very voting rights, that protection in the Voting Rights Act? It was Shelby.
Yes, and the Supreme Court overturned it, and so this isn't just a made up. Where do they get the name Voting Rights Act? Well, it's because it reinstates the Voting Rights Act that was reauthorized by Congress in 2007 and was stripped by what he would, in any other context, call an activist judge who literally said, Congress is probably too afraid to let this lapse. So the Scalia said this, too afraid to let this elapse.
Yes, he
so
read into the emotional intentions of people in Congress. And in his opinion, did he not also
it was 2006. Both chambers were Republican.
Right. And then in that opinion in 2013 by Scalia, he also pontificated about the pressures and the emotional well-being of members of Congress back in the day when they passed it, if I'm not mistaken, and currently, as if that has anything to do with like his textualist constitutional ideology. It's ridiculous. So, I mean, I'm reading between the lines here. Kinzinger doesn't like that it's called the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and then he compares that to being a babies and puppies bill. That's kind of what, I mean, that's a little insulting. They name it after John Lewis because he was a civil rights hero, and it's reinstating that very provision from Shelby.
His argument is that the substance of the bill does not reflect the title of the bill. And in fact, it
100% does.
Do it any more than that. Couldn't do it any more than that.
One of the good ones, Kinzinger.
There you go. Yes.
Standing up for democracy.
Calling from a 203 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is me?
Yes.
This is Matt from Connecticut.
Matt from Connecticut. Are you calling about Joe Lieberman's revelation in his book that he was helped in his reelection after having lost to Ned Lamont by George Bush and Karl Rove?
I am not, Sam. Unfortunately, I was still pretty young when Joe Lieberman was relevant.
Well, he wrote the book now that you're an old person.
I will read about Joe Lieberman.
Don't buy that book.
Reason to hate Joe Lieberman.
Yes. You can read it in the remainder bins.
Yes, if it falls off the back of a truck, as Matt would say, you can read it.
I wouldn't know where to pirate it, but,
we're not advocating for that.
Oh, I would advocate for it, but nobody who's going to pirate it? Who's going to be the first person to go like, I know this. People are going to be super psyched to get this free Joe Lieberman book. All right,
well,
but go ahead.
Aside from that, we got Carnival on the street over here every day with all the Brazilians coming with their Louis Vuitton bags and Gucci watches and whatnot.
Yeah.
You might have picked up a bit of Portuguese. It's hard over here right now, Sam.
I understand. Very difficult. We were just talking about, we have another clip of Lindsey Graham talking about it again. I don't know what, if there must be something going on in South Carolina, there must be something going on in South Carolina, like there's some local politics involving like a Brazilian restaurant in South Carolina or something. But go ahead.
So the reason I'm calling is I was listening last week when you guys were talking about the lovely Joe Rogan, and it got me thinking about how something Binder talked about on his Doom show with the America's frontline doctors and how this information ends up getting back down to normal people.
Yep.
Like my brother and people in my family, where there's all these studies out there that say how effective vaccines are, and then they pick out the one study on ivermectin that says it's maybe possibly useful for something, but you can't really prove anything from it. And then instead of picking all these thousands of doctors that are, pushing vaccines that work, he gets on Brett Weinstein and Pierre Corey, who are talking about ivermectin.
Right.
And The Intercept had an article, a couple weeks ago about how that organization basically made millions of dollars.
There's
prescribing ivermectin.
Yeah, there's a story out there. Apparently a hacker broke into one of the not the payment but the fulfillment software or one part of that chain, and they're making a ton of cash off of it.
And these same people talk about how big pharma is trying to get you with the vaccine, as if these people don't have some sort of alternative thing that they're trying to do by pushing ivermectin.
Yeah, they're literally weaponizing the whole sort of truism, which is true about conspiracies about pharma and not releasing cures and IP protections, and weaponizing that to sell snake oil for folks during the pandemic.
And nobody is more, or at least I would challenge anybody, maybe, I don't know, maybe short of one or two people at Ring of Fire, who have done more interviews that expose just how, like, soulless and, evil, if you want, than pharmaceutical companies in terms of their willingness to pass these things. And certainly, if this was March of 2021 and people are like, I'm hesitant about the vaccine, okay. And if people are like, I can't get a day off, and, okay, I understand that. But at this point in the game, we have literally billions of shots given to probably billions of people at this point around the world. And it just doesn't hold up anymore. That type of skepticism doesn't hold up. But yeah, I mean, it's, I wish I could tell you that there was some type of like karma in the universe that these people are going to pay, but actually the way that our universe works, they usually actually get paid.
Mm-hmm.
Well, $15 million according to The Intercept.
Because these people peddle this crap, and then I got to deal with like a basically QAnon adjacent uncle, and then a younger brother who listens to Rogan all the time, likes to get all this information from there and think they're well informed.
Yep.
So I went on Corey as part of like this, what did they call it? The FLCCC. And I checked out, some of their content about what they're recommending for COVID. And in their little treatment guidelines, the first thing they have, a number of therapeutic agents have shown great promise, such as ivermectin, vitamin D, quercetin, melatonin, fluvomexetine, corticosteroids, and turmeric. I'm noticing there's something there that has been proven to work pretty dang well, and the only references to vaccines I can find in here are statements about how it loses effectiveness later. Yep. So, like, it just comes across as such a huge grift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
but that's really all I got. I don't want to take up any more of your time.
Right?
Appreciate the call. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like affirming of human nature that they're making cash off it, because otherwise it would be just completely inexplicable, right? But at least they're making cash off it, and the folks like Rogan. I mean, I saw somebody suggest Bush and Chains. Never, that guy. Suggested on Twitter, I saw that Rogan never had COVID. I find that hard to believe, but I'm not, and I think it's possible that he was given ivermectin.
I think he has a doctor who's going to say yes. How high? How much ivermectin?
But
sir?
You
because
can,
he's
if
rich
you take,
and famous.
If you take just a little bit of ivermectin, it's not going to hurt you, and you take it in conjunction with monoclonal antibodies.
The kitchen sink, as Joe Rogan said.
Exactly. I mean, the important
why can't you
thing,
just use ivermectin if it's so good? Right.
Exactly. Because it's like I had a headache, and so I took some, I sucked on a pen and I squeezed my finger, and those things seemed to work in conjunction with the Advil that I took.
Did you see this hockey player, Marco Rossi? Are you familiar with this?
No,
he
I
had
didn't see it.
COVID last year and missed a significant amount of time because of myocarditis, caused by the coronavirus.
Well, that's the other thing that they don't tell you. In fact, I've had this piece sitting on my thingamajig there for, let's see, this is from September 1, 2021. Heart problem more common after COVID-19 than after vaccination. Study finds. The Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine is associated with an increased risk of myocarditis. Specifically, this was in males. But the research, let's see. But the side effect remains rare, and COVID-19 is more likely to cause myocarditis than the vaccine is, scientists reported on Wednesday. The research, which is based on the electronic health records of about 2 million people who are 16 or older, provides a comprehensive look at the real-world incidence of various adverse events after both vaccination and infection with the coronavirus. Didn't break down the myocarditis risk by age or sex. The median age of people who developed the condition after vaccination was 25, and 19 of the 21 cases were in males, the researchers reported. There you go.
So that's a 19-year-old hockey player. So unlike what Joe Rogan said, if you're healthy, I don't see why you would get it.
Yeah.
If you care about myocarditis, you get vaccinated.
Exactly. And let's be clear. Apparently people get myocarditis with some regularity from like the flu and from other infections.
You
like
also
that.
should get your flu shot.
You should also get your flu shot, even though it is far less effective than the vaccine. But it is still very effective.
But notice how the through line here is, obviously conspiracy peddlers and people trying to make money. But there's an allergy to preventative medicine in this country. Which is what the vaccines are. They prevent you from getting, in most cases, really significant COVID or getting COVID whatsoever and other diseases. Because we've been so conditioned to see healthcare as this incredibly expensive luxury, there are a lot of people who have skepticism towards preventative treatments because they'd rather just take their chances, hope they don't get COVID, as opposed to, well, I would be actively making this choice to get a shot in my arm, so let me look at all of these other ways that this could go wrong, even though I'm already playing Russian roulette and I'd have cognitive dissonance about that because it's not ingrained in us. Because they know they would be getting that substance inside of them, they have anxiety about it, and then they work backwards from that. But a lot of that just comes from internalized fears about, like, nobody in this country, most people in this country don't have the financial ability in other instances to take preventative measures when it comes to their health. And so that's like the framework with which we're operating in.
Yeah. I mean, if we had some mechanism of universal health care coverage, let's say like a single payer, but any type of and if everybody had a relationship with a doctor, however you get there. Now, really, the most efficient way of getting there is single payer healthcare coverage. But even if we were to get there by some other mechanism where people actually had relationships with their doctors, things would probably be much better. And on top of which, parents get their kids vaccinated all the frickin' time to go to school.
Yeah.
Like, you cannot send your kid to school without getting them a... well, there's a whole host of vaccinations that you got to get. The measles, but rubella, mumps.
Actually, I have a funny clip of Dave Rubin talking about how important it is to get your kids vaccinated for all this stuff in 2015 that maybe we should revisit.
Okay, well, in that case, hold on. Let's save that. We'll do like a whole little Dave Rubin thing. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 405 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
I'm Gregory from Oklahoma.
Gregory from Oklahoma. Long time no talk to. How is the race going, Gregory?
It's going well. I wanted to call and update you guys about a couple of things. First thing, my campaign kickoff is this coming Sunday. I'm having it at my English teacher from my senior year's house.
Cool.
So it's really exciting. Also, last time whenever I called, I told you all I didn't have a campaign website. This time I do. I had part of it worked on from a friend of mine here in Oklahoma. And then someone, the last time that I called, who's a listener of the show, tweeted at you guys to see if you can get me in contact with him to help with the website. And he helped me get it to where it is today.
Oh, wow. I'm checking it out right now. Is it Gregory for HD? I imagine that stands for House District 26?
Yeah, that's it.
Gregory, this site looks good. Is that your campaign poster too?
Yeah.
That's a good-looking campaign poster, man.
Thank you.
I like that. I like that. That looks good. I like it. It's clean. I like the white background. I like the colors. I like the font.
Yeah.
I like the blue.
The campaign logo.
I like the blue background. Like that's a nice.
Very pleasing.
Blue. Yeah.
Website.
Right. And the colors.
Yeah. And
don't contrast too badly.
Yeah, the campaign logo was made by someone who is also from Oklahoma, but they met me or found me through Bosch's community because I went on his stream a few months ago, and they knew I was going to be running, and they said that they wanted to help me with my campaign logos and stuff. So they've made a lot of graphics for the campaign. So the Left is Best community and the online leftist community here in Oklahoma and in other states are helping out my campaign. And I also want to thank everyone who listens to Majority Report, who's donated to my campaign or retweeted my donation link. It really means a lot. I can't thank every one of you enough. Same with you, Sam, for letting me call in all these years so I can get connected with some of these people.
And so is the campaign is now active? Is that right?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yep. My campaign kickoff will be this coming Sunday, and I'm going to start knocking doors within the next coming week, month. So yeah.
All right. And so just to be clear, Greg, you've got a contact sheet on there. If there's anybody who's in Oklahoma or anywhere around the 26th district, or I imagine you would take neighboring states too and want to go out and campaign for Gregory. I mean, literally, his last name is for Oklahoma, and they're in Oklahoma. And I think that has got to. I see you going by a pseudonym on your site, but you will always be Gregory in Oklahoma to me. So, I mean, how much more?
Gregory from or for Oklahoma.
Gregory for? Well, I mean, in Oklahoma is the way that I've always seen Gregory, but yeah, you can change that. Good luck, and keep us updated if you can.
I will. I'll try to call in sometime next month.
All right, fantastic. Congratulations again, folks. Pass that around the Discord and help out Gregory. Appreciate the call, man, and good luck. Good luck.
Thanks.
Bye. Thanks. All right, bye-bye. All right, we got to get to...
Got some breaking news.
Yeah, we do have some breaking news.
Hold on for a second. Why don't you guys give it to me as soon as I do this? What do you got?
Breaking news. Dennis Prager of PragerU has coronavirus.
Oh, gosh. I'm so sorry to hear that. That is, wow. I am sure it is not going to be an issue at all for him.
Well, don't worry. It's not a big issue for him by his own admission because he was trying to get COVID.
Oh, well, let's hear.
Let's hear what he has to say about it, right?
He's trying to get COVID.
Mm.
Okay, everybody, all good. I'm broadcasting from my home because I'm not going into the station as I have COVID. I was tested positive last week, and I have been steadily improving.
Oof,
at no point was I in danger of hospitalization. I have received monoclonal antibodies.
Oh, great.
That's Regeneron. I have, of course, for a year and a half, not years, been taking hydroxychloroquine from the beginning with zinc.
Not prophylactic.
I've taken Z-Pak, the erythromycin,
He's been positive.
as the Zelenko protocol would have.
He's been taking a Z-Pak prophylactically for a year?
Well,
he might have just meant the hydroxy
He's been taking hydroxychloroquine prophylactically.
Okay, because I can't wait for the super bugs that we're developing with all these people taking Z-Pak. COVID's not the only thing, incidentally, that creates variants and mutates. There was not too long ago, we were very, very concerned about the overprescription of antibiotics in this country. All right, but let's continue on to listen to Dennis Prager, who
he should be overjoyed. He's got COVID. That's what he wanted all along, to have the natural immunity. So I don't know why he's choking as he speaks instead of doing a little dance.
Well, you know what would have been more effective was to see him in the midst of it, like when he was not doing so well before the
monoclonal antibodies.
That would have been far more. That would have been a real school, and it could have taken us to COVID U, as it were. But let's continue to play.
A year and a half, not years, been taking hydroxychloroquine from the beginning with zinc. I've taken Z-Pak, the erythromycin, as the Zelenko protocol would have it. I have taken ivermectin. I have done what a person should do.
Everybody has access
if one is not going to get vaccinated. It is infinitely preferable to have natural immunity than vaccine immunity.
There's absolutely no data to support that.
That is what I hoped for the entire time. Hence, I engaged with strangers, constantly hugging them, taking photos with them, knowing that I was making myself very susceptible to getting COVID.
Can you pause it for a second?
Indeed, as bizarre.
I just love the idea of Dennis Prager running around like a crowded mall or like a supermarket,
dinosaur.
Breathe in my mouth. Breathe in my mouth. I've been hugging on purpose. Dude, I don't even know you.
Right. He goes to Applebee's.
Yeah. I'm sure all the multiple people that he hugged in any given day were really excited to be part of his I want to get COVID experiment.
And if he already contracted it, but he's still conducting the experiment,
You're going out and you're hugging 12, 15 people a day, and you're licking sidewalks and stuff like that in an attempt to get COVID or whatever it is. You don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe you can get it from surfaces. And am I at an ice cream store? Let me lick that, the door handle, so that, and then you're the next person he hugs. I don't know. I sort of feel like I would want full disclosure. You're doing an experiment where you're trying to get COVID. All right.
Well, you should be familiar with the phrase informed consent at this point.
Exactly.
So maybe you should get my consent to be part of this experiment.
Let's hear it.
He really should have done more of the Christmas story, licking of lampposts or whatever, because he put other people at risk here. But I digress.
Entire time. Hence, I engaged with strangers, constantly hugging them, taking photos with them.
Constantly.
Knowing that I was making myself very susceptible to getting COVID, which is indeed, as bizarre as it sounded, what I wanted, in the hope that I would achieve natural immunity and be taken care of by therapeutics. That is exactly what has happened.
Pause it for 1 second. Why would you want immunity from something that you want to get?
No, because he's saying natural immunity. Now he's clear forever, which is not true. Not true.
But first of all, that's not true. But that doesn't make any sense. If you're not afraid of catching it, why would you be desperately looking for immunity from it? In other words, who cares?
Yeah, who cares if you're
right? This is the argument. His argument is COVID is not that big of a deal. But I was desperately trying to get natural immunity from the thing that I was trying to desperately get.
Which is why I got a monoclonal antibody infusion, which costs thousands of dollars. So you viewers, you're definitely in the same position as me.
I mean, the reason why kids go out to chickenpox parties is because if you get the chickenpox when you're older, it's more dangerous. But according to Prager, this is a nothing burger. So why are you desperate to get natural immunity from something that you're not afraid of getting in the first place?
I'd love to know if this broadcast was live or pre-recorded. I guess it's pre-recorded. Because I don't think he would have taken the risk to have like some sort of coughing fit on air live.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would have been nice if he broadcast and sorry, I'm doing fine, and he just kept getting progressively worse, but he instead waited until he was on the
Exactly,
upswing.
yeah. I just want to make sure that this isn't going to go south for me, and I'm not going to be embarrassed.
I want to wait till I make sure I avoid the hospital.
Continue.
In the hope that I would achieve natural immunity and be taken care of by therapeutics. That is exactly what has happened. It should have happened to the great majority of Americans. The number of deaths in this country owing to COVID is a scandal, which one day will be clear to Americans.
Remember when Donald Trump sat on the White House lawn and was like, everyone is going to get the treatment that I got. Everyone will get it. Everyone. And no.
Nope, not so much. But Prager gets it. But because he can afford it, you guys might not be able to.
Do you?
His viewers.
So let me be clear on the hydroxychloroquine. You need to, if you get COVID, you need to take it for a year and a half before you get COVID for it to help your COVID. Is that the way it works?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's therapeutics.
He was taking it prophylactically, and apparently it didn't work.
Right. So then he has to take the therapeutics.
But it did make it possible for him to survive by taking monoclonal antibodies.
Yeah, and then his implication that we should have just done the herd immunity thing is, I mean, classic right wing, just completely devoid of any sort of knowledge of the world. For instance, South Korea escaped fewer COVID deaths than all but 9 states in this country, 10 if you include District of Columbia. So most states in America have more COVID deaths than South Korea.
Right.
And did he like source what happened when Sweden tried the herd immunity push? Yeah. Because it didn't go great there.
Well, speedy recovery to Dennis Prager, and good luck to all those people he hugged in the interim where he didn't realize he had COVID.
And good luck to his plumber, because there's a lot of stuff going in and out of Dennis Prager's body at this point. Z-Pack, did he say ivermectin? No.
Oh, yeah, he was taking the iver.
Yeah.
Of course.
Well, good luck to any hospitals in the area.
Right.
It's a weird thing at the beginning.
He'll be all right. He'll be all right. I'm fine. I'm doing much better now. So glad I got this.
God, it sounded...
So glad I got this. This is exactly what my plan was, and I'm so... And I hope the people I hugged also really appreciate it.
Jesus, you sound like Darth Vader at the beginning.
Since we're talking about vaccinations, here's Chuck Todd talking to Governor Asa Hutchinson about vaccine mandates, which, and look, anybody who says that if you are giving people the choice between having a job and not having a job, and saying to people, you cannot have this job unless you get vaccinated, to those people who say that is coercion and that is coercive, that it is not right. If you're forcing me to leave a job and hopefully go find another one, that is force. You are using force and coercion against me to get vaccinated. What I say to you is, you are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. But it's not just vaccines that provide that coercion. That's like, hey, you know what? I know that you need this job, and so we're going to give you worse working conditions. I know that you need this job, and so we're going to cut corners on safety. I know that you need this job, so we're going to give you less of a pension. We're going to make you pay more of the health care. I know you need this job, on and on and on. It is coercive. welcome to the world of understanding that people's need to make money is a coercive element in our society. And in this one narrow instance, that coercion is being used to force a vaccine that will save the lives of those people and other people around it.
The other people forced to work.
The other people forced to work. But the bottom line is, you are right. Hold on to that notion, because when we're past COVID, there's a whole nother host of issues that are going to be really important to address about under what circumstances people who need to work have to swallow to get that work. Now you're beginning to understand when we say that it's not a question of me saying, hey, I can choose to work here or not. You don't have that free choice. You are obligated. There is a coercive nature to that.
Yeah, the vaccine's coercive, but having to pee your pants because you can't go on bathroom breaks at the poultry plant, yeah, that's not coercive.
Well, the coercive part is that we need to work, and there may not be other opportunities. And what you are forced to accept by your employer. And so just keep that in mind. If you're one of those people who have recognized that someone's need to work puts them at a disadvantage with management, capitalists, whatever you want to call it, hold on to that. Mm-hmm. You have reached a certain level of enlightenment. And that's an important dynamic to know, that you're not just forced to take vaccines in those situations. It can be forced to be a whole host of things.
Preach.
So keep that in mind. All right, now let's move on to this clip. Sorry, I just got a little distracted. This is a clip of Chuck Todd producing evidence to Governor Asa Hutchinson that vaccine mandates are working in his very own state. And talk about hemming and hawing.
Oh, my heart goes out to these workers that many of them say, we're not anti-vax, we're just anti-mandate, and they're making a principled stand, and that sort of makes the point that the mandates are not being beneficial. So I push back here in Arkansas that we don't need to counter a federal mandate on our employers with a state mandate on our employers. That's just the wrong direction, and I made that point.
Well, I want to ask you, though, if we got some evidence here that mandates work. Let me show you some statistics in your state. On August 1st, 36% of the state was fully vaccinated. After the vaccine mandate was announced, and you had companies like Tyson's and Walmart in your state essentially announce their own vaccine mandates, vaccine acceptance went up 30%, got 46% of the state now. Is that not evidence that the mandates by Tyson's and Walmart have had an impact?
Well, absolutely, it does indicate that, and it's not just there, but our healthcare workers, many of our hospitals have put in a requirement for vaccines, and the rate goes up. So yes, there is an effectiveness there. And so let me make it clear that when I say I don't believe we ought to be engaging in mandates, I'm speaking of the government mandates, whether it's a federal government mandate or a state government mandate. And the states are sometimes coming in and saying employers should not have the ability to impose a vaccine requirement on their workers. To me, that's the wrong direction as well. It's not practical in terms of creating that debate, but it's not principled either. So I am a defender of the employer's right to provide a healthy workplace. You would have just as many workers say, I don't want to work there because it's not a healthy workplace, because not everybody's going to be vaccinated. The employers are in a tough position. They should have the prerogative to make those decisions, and I support that.
You know, there is...
So, okay.
He told on himself when he said, I support the employer's right. Boom, then, you know.
This is what got Kristi Noem in trouble in South Dakota, this exact same argument.
Well, this is them trying to split the difference here, because this is that way you allow the free market to decide. The unfortunate thing for Asa Hutchinson, if he was actually being interviewed by somebody who actually wanted to nail this down, he would say, do you think it's a coincidence that these corporations made this decision because of a federal mandate? Like, Do you think it's a coincidence that this happened right after the federal government said, hey, we're going to impose a mandate on you to impose an ultimatum to your, well, in fact, I guess maybe you could argue the federal thing was not a mandate. I think it was, but technically it was an ultimatum. You have two choices. If you have over 100 employees, you could have vaccinate them or you got to test them on a weekly basis. Oh, testing on a weekly basis is more expensive. Vaccination, bingo. And does Asa Hutchinson think that was a complete coincidence that these major corporations with over 100 employees decided to do this, and then my vaccination rate went up?
He doesn't think that. He's trying to toe this line publicly, although he's come off as very weak in a variety of moments throughout the pandemic. But he secretly wants corporations in his state to be able to do what they want. He's sympathetic to the compulsory vaccination, but he can't say that publicly.
Yeah, of course. He's like, thank God.
Yeah,
thank God that my state is not turning into like a hellfire pit because we got our ass saved by the federal government.
Right.
That's what that was.
He loves that they can take the heat for that because the reality is that corporations in his state don't want COVID outbreaks and they want these vaccine mandates in order to keep making profit. So he wants to publicly have this position and then behind the scenes back whatever the bosses want.
Meanwhile, man of the people, Jesse Waters, went to Trinity College.
Mother disappointer.
What was that?
He's upset his mother quite a lot. She's saying, Jesse, you should stop doing this stuff. And he laughs at her on
He reads her disappointed texts on air as if that isn't a condemnation of himself, right?
I understand.
He plays it off for comedy as he's deeply hurt by his own soullessness.
Let's here is Jesse Waters complaining about or talking about his children's experience in Catholic school as to why he sends them there. Here we go.
Jesse, you've got school-age kiddos. This was before the pandemic. Things were getting bad. How much worse has it been for your kids over the last year and a half?
Well, they're okay because they're in Catholic schools and the Catholics don't play. They were in person. That's true. Learning and reading, so we're grateful for that. But
pause it for 1 second. I can also tell you who else doesn't play. Almost every other private school also does not play, as it were. They got a lot more money. They get the parents, contribute more money. They have smaller amounts of classrooms. They have smaller students. And almost every private school, in fact, every private school that I'm aware of, now I'm not aware of that many, but they went to school throughout because they could do testing and et cetera, et cetera. But continue.
How much worse has it been for your kids over the last year and a half?
Well, they're okay because they're in Catholic schools and the Catholics don't play. They were in person. That's true. Learning and reading, so we're grateful for that. But in slavery, the ruling class would not allow Black Americans to read. They didn't want them to have an education. Why? Because knowledge is power. And if someone doesn't have that knowledge and power...
Pause it for 1 second. Just in case you're confused as to what ruling class means during slavery, it means white people.
White people. That sounds
white
a little
people
like critical race
would not
theory,
let
Sam.
Black people read.
Yeah.
It's not like you would have the neighbor who was not part of the ruling class, just happened to be white down the road, going well, I'll teach your Black slaves to read. No, that's not what happened. But let's go back. Let's make this about slavery as the ruling class. By ruling class, he means literally the slave masters.
Right.
Continue.
Catholics don't play. They were in person.
That's true.
Learning and reading, so we're grateful for that. But in slavery, the ruling class would not allow Black Americans to read. They didn't want them to have an education. Why? Because knowledge is power. And if someone doesn't have that knowledge and power, it's easier to dominate you. And that thinking is still prevalent today. The ruling class in this country and all over the world, they don't want this generation that educated. They want them educated enough so they can do menial jobs and kind of entry-level management, but they don't want them intelligent. So they start asking questions like, where are all the hundreds of billions of dollars that are going into these public school systems that keep failing? Why don't they teach economics in school? Why do they keep failing students and then graduating them to the next class? And you wonder why people can't do math, and then you realize that they're teaching you that math is racist. So there are powerful people in this country that don't care about education. They want indoctrination. They want people mad at the other race, and they want them kind of divided so they're distracted and dumb, so they're not seeing what the ruling class is doing, raiding the treasury, opening the borders, and sending all the jobs to China.
Jessica, that is Huxley from Jesse.
I always try to think before the show, like, what will Jesse say?
Wait. This is like Sarah Palin level grade word salad stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that, yes, the ruling elite in this country certainly do not want the masses to be educated.
Hence student loan debt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's be clear here. Public schools exist because the radical Republicans during Reconstruction wanted to make sure that those freed slaves...
These good Republicans, we should say.
Exactly. Those freed slaves, and frankly, everyone else who wasn't getting educated got educated as a way of making sure that access to education was democratically, both democratizing and democratically distributed. And the idea that somehow, like, people are going to get smart and realize that they're just teaching us about race, like, he goes off the rails here.
Yeah. 2 + 2 equals white people are racist. I don't think this is right.
Wait a second. This is the ruling elite wanting us to actually, like, to hide the ball and not give us math, but tell us that there's actually an oppressed group of people in this country that have been systemically oppressed for 400 years, but 200 years since slavery. Go back so we can listen to this unbelievable word salad here. God.
Failed attempt at projection.
Oh my God, right. That's what I wanted to say. Like the amount of projection there is unbelievable. Also, what he's doing is he's trying to mimic Tucker Carlson, but he can't pull it off.
Well, and Bill O'Reilly. I mean, this is a set piece. Understand. He has dished this up. This isn't like spontaneous. And so all I can say is there's got to be people in the Trinity College Alumni Association going, geez, this is going to hurt our numbers.
The next class. And you wonder why people can't do math, and then you realize that they're teaching you that math is racist. So there are powerful people in this country that don't care about education. They want indoctrination. They want people mad at the other race, and they want them kind of divided so they're distracted. At the other race.
Pause it for 1 second. Wait. We got to go back a little bit here, too. All right, so let's be clear here. Who are the people they want mad at the other race? Do they want white people mad at the black people? Is that something that, like, this is a new phenomenon?
No, it's critical race theory. They want, right, okay.
But this is my point, is that, like, he's not saying the elite want white people mad at black people. He's saying the elite want black people mad at white people because of their race. Like, wait, what?
Yeah, just like in slavery when plantation owners taught other slaves to hate other white people.
Exactly. It's like, oh, here's the way that we maintain control over society. We teach black people that they have been systemically oppressed in this country, and the systems we still have now are like, and that way, we as the people who control these systems, that's the way we'll be safe.
It's a galaxy brain thought. I mean, the thing that's also a part of what Jesse Waters is trying to do here, which is obscure who the actual ruling class is.
Of course.
They want it to be like, like Beyonce, the ruling class.
The dude is making millions of dollars a year on television and working for essentially, like one of the most politicized media enterprises in the history of man. And he's talking about the dark elite that are out there.
He wants to conflate,
as his kids go to private school.
Yeah, no, he wants to conflate the ruling class, which are just, as we've mentioned many times on this program, the CEOs and the bosses and all, and the members of our political classes, wants to conflate that with like a liberal culture that the audience feels excluded from. That's
Right.
it.
Yes.
And then you don't have any threat to capitalism whatsoever, and you can flip that rhetoric on its head.
It's just the sheer incompetence. Like, you got to, dude, put a little effort into this. If you're going to create these conspiracy theories, at least, like, you know, make them maintain some consistency. The elite is trying to teach black people that they've been systemically oppressed
Why
by
do they need
racism in this country, because
consistency?
that's going to provide them maintain their status.
Why do they need consistency?
So what? All right, continue.
Right? Like, oh.
No, we don't. Yeah, let's continue.
So there are powerful people in this country that don't care about education. They want indoctrination. They want people mad at the other race, and they want them kind of divided so they're distracted and dumb, so they're not seeing what the ruling class is doing, raiding the treasury, opening the borders, and sending all the jobs to China.
Jessica, that feels very Brave New World. It's very Aldous Huxley from Jesse.
Ooh, I knew who
I
wrote
always try to
that.
think before the show, like, what will Jesse say? And I did not.
Bracelet doesn't take too long.
Did you have down
Don't think
Aldous
too long.
Huxley?
I did not.
Brave New World.
No, definitely not. And obviously, I vehemently disagree with the comparison to what slave owners were doing and trying to keep people enslaved and working on plantations versus what educators and, quote, ruling class folks are doing.
Well, think about it, though, for a second, because you're not allowing people to do charter schools. And now they're saying you don't want parents to have a stake in their child's education. If you interrupt that little power structure that we have set up right now, that unleashes the beast.
Well, first of all, who are the people? Who are the parents who have a say? I mean, there used to be a day it was like, we've got to give control to the school boards. We can't have federal control. Now it's like they want every single parent to be their own school board. And it's all just about masking, too. That's the big...
No, and critical race theory.
100 years ago, this would be the Scopes monkey trial, people.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Jesse Waters, ladies and gentlemen. Jesse Waters.
He said, didn't he have that affair with that intern? He's sending his kids to Catholic. It's like all high and mighty about going to Catholic school.
But he married her.
Okay, well then I guess that does,
and they had a kid together.
Honest, yeah. We should do the parental leave stuff before we run out of time.
Okay. Let's do
we
that.
still have Dave Rubin, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, we got a little flexibility now. There we go. Back to the old days with a 4-hour show.
Get back on the phone with MSNBC.
Poor Matt. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. This is just stunning. Do we just play we just have the tweets, right?
There's the Tucker clip too.
Oh, okay. Let's start with the Tucker clip. So Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, he is married. What's his husband's name?
Chasen.
Chasen. So he and his husband Chasen have adopted a child, right? Did they adopt or they have a surrogate? I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know the details of it. Nevertheless, they have a new baby. And Buttigieg took parental leave. And apparently, this is an abomination. The idea of a father bonding with a newborn is just...
It's gay.
Well,
it's disgusting, and it's obviously
And also,
gay.
who's going to think of the boss that he's not serving when he's doing that?
Right. I mean, but let's...
How emasculating that he would take control over taking care for his family as opposed to serving a boss, right?
Here is Tucker Carlson making it clear how disgusting this is.
But still, the White House does not seem concerned. Pete Buttigieg has been on leave from his job since August after adopting a child. Paternity leave, they call it, trying to figure out how to breastfeed. No word on how that went. But now he's back in office as the transportation secretary, and he's deeply amused, he says, to see that dozens of container ships can't get into this country.
Now, the idea that let's just work backwards. There are dozens of container ships who are off the coast of the United States because there is so much containers at these ports that they're trying to find it. Now, part of the problem is there's simply a lack of truck drivers because independent trucking has been squeezed dramatically over the past 5-10 years. I mean, just dramatically. Super expensive. Trucking companies have also been cutting rates on truckers. Part of that is a function of monopsony buyers. Places like Walmart, other places that basically are saying, like, these are the prices that we need to get from you. And if we don't get them from you, you're going to be destroyed. So there's a much, much bigger problem here than just when we see it play out with our infrastructure and our logistics. That is because there's big problems that are downstream from that and upstream from it, frankly. But the idea that you need to breastfeed to take paternity leave is, I know it's funny for Tucker's audience, but it really is ridiculous. Now, who could possibly come in with a stupider take on this? Well, Steven Crowder, of course, when he is not running from me or, taking some type of break. I don't know. What would you call that? When he was humiliated on that, that time when he was afraid that I had showed up and he actually had to check himself into a hospital because of it. What do you call that kind of break?
Like a fail hiatus or something?
Yeah, well, it's a failure leave, humiliation leave.
Yeah, like
humiliation leave.
It's sort of the same thing. I became his daddy, so he had to take a break. Mm-hmm. Is that the way that worked out? What do you call it?
It's called the reverse.
Reverse paternity.
Reverse paternity.
But look at this tweet that he puts up. What was this in response?
Well, this is in response to Matt Walsh. So maybe
let's do with Matt Walsh first.
Yeah. So this is Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire tweets out. The thing about paternity leave is there isn't much for a dad to do when the baby is a newborn, especially if mom is breastfeeding. What? His main role is to take care of mom as she recovers, but of course that doesn't apply to Buttigieg, so I'm not really sure why he needs this paternity leave at all.
Well, now let me just tell you this, as somebody who had two children. You don't breastfeed your child if you're a man, or if you're not lactating. I mean, there are some people who can't lactate, and so they have to bottle.
Yeah.
And sometimes the mother will pump, and then you feed the baby with a bottle. But of course, you don't just leave the baby alone. You want to interact with the baby. You want to develop a relationship with your child on some level.
That would be foreign to people like Matt Walsh and Tucker Carlson. Well, they're just projecting their own absent father issues onto the situation. They're
Indeed.
That's what masculinity is, and so that's the only way. And Tucker, of course, that's extreme homophobia, but
you change a diaper. Yeah. You help deal with the baby. It's not, having a baby is not just about the physical recovery of giving birth to a baby. Now, Walsh may not be aware of this because it sounds like he wasn't involved at all in when his babies came home from the hospital.
Yeah, let's go through this thread a little bit more.
Okay. Oh yeah, let's keep going. Okay, and so he says, people are saying dad needs paternity leave for bonding time. Sure, a week or something is fine. But the baby isn't going to bond with dad much until he's a little older, and we shouldn't be paying cabinet secretaries to stay home for 2 months for bonding time anyways. I think it was about 6 weeks.
I like that thing about, this is about get back to your boss, new dad. And then he goes, you can still also bond with your child while working. Okay, apparently that's really possible, I'm sure. I'm very well bonded with all 4 of my kids, and I had no paternity leave for any of them. So he starts this off by saying the thing about paternity leave, and then he says, I've never actually experienced paternity leave.
So he knows nothing about what happens during paternity leave because he decided not to. Now, which proves that it's not essential. It proves that it's not essential.
His wife's probably like glad to have him out of the house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Meanwhile, who could have even stupider take? Well, of course, it's Steven Crowder. As a dad going through this right now, everything Matt Walsh has said is accurate. Now, when did he return? He took the entire month off, didn't he?
Yeah, and that was for ostensibly for a procedure, which was behind the paywall, so we can't necessarily see it, but it also did coincide with your humiliation of him.
That's right. And
then the birth of his children.
He went on a sabbatical, I think somebody suggested from the...
So
the
he says here...
Got an IM here from, have you read my email? Crowder went on a sabbatical.
Yeah, it's funny.
And he writes, as a dad going through this right now, everything Matt Walsh has said is accurate. Paternity leave is for pussies. Like, now, I'm not even sure I get, like, is he being ironic?
No.
Yeah, is he trying to be is it a double entendre?
Yeah.
He means pussies as in like weak males and not as in like recovery of a woman.
What does that mean, weak male? Why would a weak male take
Soy boys,
paternity?
Because they envision themselves as madmen type men who go to work and like even when the wife is in labor. That's her job, not mine.
Now, we've talked about Steven Crowder on this program many times, and it's almost impossible to bring up Steven Crowder, at least in the context in which I've dealt with him, without mentioning his father, who is his manager, wouldn't allow him to pull the plug on the debate on at Politicon. Also, when they canceled the first debate with Ethan, it's his dad who wrote to Ethan and said, Steven can't come out and play today.
Also, no funny stuff, guys.
Right. No funny stuff. Because I guess Crowder had to hide behind his dad in that instance. I'm not sure exactly what, but I suspect that Crowder really needs to show his dad that he is masculine. And if it takes saying stuff like, hey, spending time with your newborn is for weak people. And look how strong I am. I'm actually going to weight lift. And I'm going to get really, really big, Dad. And you're going to be able to look at me like I'm a real man. And I look at how much I hate like gay people and how gay and icky they are, Dad. Because I'm a real man, Dad.
Cigar and gun holsters, Dad.
Yeah, look, I have a gun. I'm normalizing things. Like I gotta shoot him up, bang, bang.
Dad, I'm only wearing this dress and these fake boobs because I'm making fun of how bad this stuff is.
I'm making fun of like how people who would be like a girly are, Dad. Because I'm a real man, Dad.
You didn't even read the part where he said he went on paternity leave himself.
Did he say that? Well,
no, he says he offers it.
Offers it.
For his
sorry.
male employees.
Yeah, I'll provide 2 weeks of paternity leave for my male employees. Well, that's also his way of saying, like, don't take maternity leave.
None of them. Also, none of them are procreating. So we don't have to worry about it.
Exactly.
Well,
it is the intense pressure on Crowder to prove his masculinity to his father is really, really impressive. And it really is.
And sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the whole paternity leave conversation here, it's kind of a twofer for conservatives, right? Because someone like Tucker can sprinkle in homophobia in there.
Yeah.
You can do it in like an old school way that appeals to your audience. But what it also does is it hits at this core anxiety that's like such a through line that we talk about with changing gender norms and roles. It's even present in QAnon, children being outside of the home. What does that mean when the mother is working? Like they get to throw back to a time when the man went to work and the woman stayed at home with the kids. And you're a pussy if you diverge from those norms. And by the way, we should point out that the trope of a stay-at-home mom is an inherently white and privileged trope. And so that's a lot of what this does too, is the preservation of that vision of the man that goes to work and the woman that stays home with the kids is a upper middle class, it's a classist, and it's a racist, pure white vision that he's trying to preserve there. And then of course all of that is just projection.
Yeah, well, the important part too is that Daddy sees me as a real guy's guy.
Yeah.
I'm a guy's guy.
I hope that the right continues this, go serve your boss instead of be with your family take, because I know a new father who's in his 20s, and he had a generous parental leave policy. It said that those weeks were magical, not only because of, spending time with the kid, but also didn't have to go to fucking work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of nice.
Gay.
Yeah.
Gay. So gay. Kind of sus.
I mean, there really should be two different sort of like slots. One, you get parental leave if you're a father. Yeah, and then the other one is you don't take it if you're trying to show your dad that you're a tough guy and that you're a real man. Dad.
I'm a real man like you. I won't be present for my kids either.
I think it goes a little deeper with Crowder.
Got in trouble with YouTube recently for misinformation about trans people.
He did. I'm shocked about that.
About that topic.
Absolutely shocked. Should we save Dave Rubin for tomorrow? Huh?
All right. I mean, it's already been trending for a little bit.
Well, let's just put this. Let's just do this one, and we'll do the other. We got to do the Dave Rubin, and then we'll. Folks, we're not going to have time for any more calls. We'll take more calls tomorrow. Apologies.
Very sound-rich day today. We had a lot of good stuff.
We got into stuff. It was too good.
It's amazing how some days are, we don't got much, and today we got a lot.
Now, look, when we talk about Steven Crowder, right, the driving force, I think, behind Steven Crowder's entire sort of public persona is a function of him feeling insecure about his own masculinity and trying to prove to his dad that he's actually a real man. I mean, I think that's almost everything about Crowder's public visage is that. It is the gun that he wears. It is that the mocking of trans people,
while still dressing up like them, because he definitely doesn't enjoy it. But it's just to perform it and show something.
I think like there's a flip side of the coin when you're trying to prove your masculinity to your dad. There must be something inside of you that makes you feel that there's something. Maybe there's some deficit that you're showing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But whether it's the obsessive weightlifting to the point where it causes him health concerns, it seems like, or the idea of I can't get into a debate with somebody who's I'm going to lose to in some way, so I'm going to go only debate. I mean, not really debate college students. That's Steven Crowder's thing.
Mm-hmm.
But Dave Rubin's just stupid. That's what animates everything he does. A complete lack of knowledge and a desire to be, I think, a celebrity on some level. And so he'll say or do anything and also be completely oblivious. Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen Dave Rubin. Why don't we play the Dave Rubin circling the wagons? Do you know what it means to circle the wagons, folks?
Yeah. But do we have that?
Yeah, it's a tweet, actually, if you can put that up.
Yeah, put this up.
He keeps getting this stuff wrong.
Circling the wagons.
The communicator. But
incidentally, this is his primary job.
Yes.
That is to communicate things. Bad move for conservatives to be circling the wagons around Bill Maher right now. He's the last mainstream liberal, calls out his own side and defends free speech. Take him out, and it all gets worse, including for you. Now,
I think this is around a Bill Maher N-word incident.
Fair enough. And circling the wagons is the way that you protect somebody in between the wagon. The idea was that when pioneers were under assault, they would circle the wagons and create almost a makeshift fort,
a defensive perimeter.
Yes, a defensive perimeter. And then he came back and he said, a couple of folks correctly saying my wagons analogy isn't quite right here.
Not quite.
It's not quite right.
It's actually the exact opposite.
Right. It's not quite right in the same way that saying this is down and this is up is not quite right. This is being up.
It's
and this being down.
When I told you to take
up, down.
I told you to take a left. It wasn't quite right.
What I meant was take a right, but it didn't mean take. should be more like sharks circling, he went on to say. Okay, yes. And I love, and fair enough. That's a fair, I wanted to say fair enough. I love the fact how defensive he gets there. Like, oh, what I meant to say, instead of circling the wagons, I meant to mean circling the sharks. Because, you know, people can train sharks to circle people. But here he is, ladies and gentlemen, using, now he's going into, this is tricky territory. Mm-hmm. And look, we all have malapropisms. There's one right there.
There we go.
Occam's razor is not what Dave Rubin thinks it is.
Well, John, let me give you another razor, Occam's razor. If something can go wrong, it will. And that basically is the tagline for this administration. Let me do two things for your producers right now, because I know you guys like to fiddle with the Chiron when I'm on. Can I be called Gen X expert, or if they want to be really pithy,
yes,
Gen Expert?
We're going to call this
with the dash,
the Gen X report. We're going to get all those titles in there, because I say this all the time, the snarkiness and indifference and scorn that Gen X is so known for. That's going to save this country.
Yeah, I've been saying all the time.
All we got at this point. So that was my first request.
The complete allergy to the understanding of the words you're saying. I think he was talking about Murphy's Law.
Yeah, Occam's razor is that the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. Murphy's Law is what he articulated there.
Occam's razor, Murphy's Law.
Yeah.
I mean, just wonder how many other concepts have Dave been working under?
We've covered this. I thought, like, I saw this clip kind of came out on Friday afternoon, and I just thought, like, I want to do an advanced search of our videos, because there are a variety of, like, philosophical concepts and standard phrases that he's botched with great confidence behind his eyes in many contexts.
And let's be clear, this is a guy who made his entire online persona around the idea that he was a classical liberal. In other words, like, all of his kind of like misunderstanding about sort of the basic tenets of everything was the foundational element of his entire online presence.
I am an academic who has my roots in these, like, very highfalutin concepts about politics that I am well researched on and completely get, and he doesn't understand, like, basic phrases in that area. It's hard to artificially inflate yourself as an academic in politics when you don't necessarily have any background in that area, and also flub simple phrases.
Pretty low-hanging fruit.
Pretty low-hanging fruit, and maybe don't use it to. He was a little too excited about his secondary joke that was coming about him being the spokesperson for Gen X. So he botched it.
Gen Expert. All right, let's go through some IMs, ladies and gentlemen. Brooklyn suit. Does this mean I have to stop my extremely mature and hilarious 30-year practice of calling him Colin Powell? Jonathan Armstead, Colin Powell was bad. I want people to go check out Henry Louis Gates' book, 13 Ways of Looking at a Black Man, where he's interviewed. He says some horrible things about without consequence, including, I don't bring any stereotypes or threatening visage to white people. Some black people do. I can overcome any stereotypes or reservations they have because I perform well. I ain't that black. I speak reasonably well like a white person. He also says about being a soldier, I believe in the bully's way of going to war. I'm on the street corner. I got my gun. I got my blade. I'm going to kick your ass. Yo ass. This explains why he was responsible for the deaths of countless Iraqi, Americans, and Vietnamese as he helped cover up the My Lai massacre. Wart, I don't seem to understand this being where Manchin takes his stand. The CTC, this is the child tax credit, isn't new. Even Republicans expanded the CTC in 2017 with a phase out for individuals starting at $75K and for couples at $150. So he's pushing not just to limit the expansion, but proposing a $60K limit to contract the program? Question mark. I don't understand it. Sink Manchin's yacht, Yellow Cake Uranium, will be Powell's legacy. Will the show be streamed? We have no plans for that at the moment. Prager looking like Vladimir Harkonnen. Herd immunity is only possible with a vaccine. I guarantee Crowder has tried to breastfeed. Jennifer from St. Louis.
That's what that medical procedure was about.
Exactly. Hello, MR crew. Happy Monday. Today is one of my only baby's 21st birthday. Could I get a shofar for Nathan? Yes, you can. I had a bumper sticker on my car for years that said, "You forgot Poland, the coalition of the willing." Nolan from Detroit suburbs. Hey, MR crew. I hear a lot about inflation these days. What's the progressive counter argument to people who say that increasing wages or government investment in the economy leads to inflation? It can, but that's not what's going on here. What we have is a complete breakdown in our supply chain. And so you're not seeing a significant across the board increase in demand, maybe in some specific areas. But this is about supply chains because we have a pandemic. And I'm not convinced austerity is going to help that much. And if you, I mean, it's robbing Peter to pay Paul in that instance. And then I don't even think Paul gets made whole. Ghost Colin Powell. I have evidence to suggest the depths of hell have nuclear weapons of mass destruction. Now, that's pretty good. Random info. Prager's wheeze filter must be out of warranty. With his newfound natural immunity, he can forget the Z-Packs, horse paste, vitamin D, hydroxychloroquine, steroids, probably bleach cocktails, not to mention hugging all those strangers and cops. I do it with everyone. Matt, or maybe you can keep an eye on Bill O'Reilly, whether he's going to give a take on Colin Powell's passing. The famously clashed once on The Factor when Powell asked O'Reilly to stop repeatedly asking him to give the black man's opinion, if you will. Harvest, Powell's epitaph. Should have resigned. Go home, Jacob. On this day of Colin Powell's death, war criminals trending on Twitter. It's also my birthday. Can I get a shofar, please? You got it. Kid tested Politburo. Might have to take my karaoke machine and protest your authoritarian mask mandate at the entrance of the live show. Dolphin Fetus. Sam, you should do a weekly fun half segment, Ally of Evil, where you do 5 minutes on a war criminal in the Bush administration or media figure that enabled the illegal Iraq war. These PCOS need to be shamed when they are alive at the moments of the death and for years afterwards. That was a good idea. Fierce Day this weekend, I went to Scott's Apple Farm in Dummerston, Vermont. Some wonderful heritage apple varieties, including years old, including the Roxbury Russet. That's right. I actually picked up a couple of those. In fact, I sent to somebody who'll go unnamed on the West Coast. Those Roxbury Russets, the oldest apple in the country. I'm happy now. I'm one of those hippies who pulled my son Wes, bong maker extraordinaire, Dear Struct on Instagram, out of middle school in '94 because he was being graded on his homework, which didn't need to be due, as he got A's on his tests. Met with a woman who was homeschool mom, and she was such a fundamentalist Christian that she did the Sabbath on Saturday. Wes and her son started working together, and he eventually designed a devil tattoo for that woman's son. Needless to say, the kid was a bit rebellious. Wes designed his own curriculum, studied the beats, and did a super good paper on the Doors. Never got a diploma, as we did our own curriculum, and continues to be an autodidact and a voracious reader. He is taking orders on spoons and bongs as I write. Love you and miss Michael every day. Emma's fantastic too, by the way. Love Michelle. That's from Em. Happy
Michelle.
Now.
We had a homeschool kid that joined our basketball team somehow, like a couple of years, and
well, they're starting to do that now, where you can join the sports teams.
Yeah, and like he was interesting. Like we got along with him okay, but there was like a difference socialization wise, and it never made me think like, oh, that seems like it's fun to do.
Yeah. Michael would say that when he got interviewed for his college interview, that one of his college interviewers said, like, you're pretty socialized for, I mean, you know, different people do it different ways, but I also think growing up in a fundamentalist, as a fundamentalist is also going to impact that. As, you know, maybe more, maybe less than you know, being homeschooled. But Meaden, I mean, that's the funny thing about it is, like, you know, you never heard all these people like, you got to send the kids back to school. Where are they talking about with the homeschooling? Like, why haven't they been so worried about other people's kids in that instance? Meaden. Hey, Sam and Emma, when is the UK live show happening? Sorted out. Left is best from Scotland. That may take a little while. Left Sparky. Great interview today, guys. Thanks for what you do. Rob from Dedham. I don't know what I'm more excited for. Majority Report live at the Wilbur or the friggin' Sox dominating the Stros on Saturday with 2 grand slams in the first 2 innings. Luckily, these things are not mutually exclusive. Go Sox. Go Majority Report live in Boston. Hope to see you there, Rob from Dedham. Transwarfare, new Bond movie was good, but it was long. Almost 3 hours long. Dart Bain. Emma got her first TD scorer in Monday Night Football. I don't know what that means.
What? Comrade
Daniel. Jesse Waters kind of look like Glenn Greenwald in profile. Michael from Bavaria. When will Crowder's dad end his paternity leave?
Oh, good for... Oh, yeah. That's funny.
Ivan Humpalot. Do you think Rubin and Crowder have the same therapist who specializes in Sam Seder phobia? Pep. I'm driving from Seattle to Brooklyn right now. We'll be passing through Dakotas. Matt, got a hiking recommendation?
Oh, Badlands. Yeah, see the Badlands would be my advice.
Brain Party. Has anyone in the office read up on Evergrande use in China? Evergrande issue in China? This is a big real estate conglomerate. U.S. business press is making it sound like the Chinese Lehman Brothers, but it does seem like a totally different situation. I haven't, but soon too. Bourbon Socialist. It's amazing. Prager probably took $10,000 worth of therapeutics in order to keep himself upright during a 60-second video, and he still sounded like a zombie in that video. He thinks every person should follow his COVID treatment path, but still took all those different treatments because his conservative brain will not allow him to admit that a free vaccine is more effective than just buying your way out of COVID. It's amazing how a man whose career has led him to be able to live in a multi-million-dollar house while being so absolutely ignorant about politics, current events. Like he's just a genuinely dumb F. Totally served. This is Rubin. I think he's talking to... Okay, 2 more, and then we're out of here. Smirmarin. Brett Weinstein was contacted by a pregnant woman whose mother has COVID. So far, she hasn't contracted it. He advised the woman to stay in isolation, but it might be possible she has the antibodies, so he could be well. No mention of vaccination. Brett Weinstein has I mean, at that point, vaccination's a little bit late, but... And the final I am of the day. Jay Chivone, Buttigieg's husband name is pronounced Chasten, and they have adopted 2 babies. Ricin will be Powell's legacy, not yellow cake. Indeed. Matt, Bradley, Emma, good job today. Folks, see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie.